They say true genius isn't creating the impossible, but making the unbelievable feel inevitable. But what if it's neither? What if it's simply memory? Because what if the dazzling smile, the impossible flick, the balletic dribble wasn't Ronaldinho's at all? What if that pure, unadulterated joy, that defiant freedom, that cosmic dance on the pitch, wasn't his invention, but an echo? A whisper from the game's primeval heart, manifesting through a single, extraordinary vessel. The true shock, the unsettling truth, is that Ronaldinho wasn't merely a player. He was a doorway. A shimmering, joyous portal through which the very essence of football's forgotten, untamed spirit briefly returned to remind us of its terrifying, beautiful potential. And for a fleeting era, he allowed us to glimpse a game so raw, so free, it felt almost illicit. This isn't just about a Ballon d'Or, it's about a man who briefly became the embodiment of a myth, and in doing so, altered the very fabric of our understanding, leaving behind a legacy that is not merely remembered, but haunted. The incarnation of wonder. From the dusty pitches of Porto Alegre, a legend began to stir, not born of ambition, but of an ancient longing. Ronaldinho Gaucho emerged not as a product of meticulous training regimens alone, but as if summoned by the game itself, a living embodiment of its most cherished dreams. He wasn't just a prodigy, he was an incarnation, a vessel chosen to channel football's purest, most untamed energies. His very arrival in the elite arenas felt less like a transfer and more like a celestial event, a comet streaking across a predictable night sky, announcing a new dawn of impossible artistry. Before the world knew his name, before the golden ball rested in his grasp, tales circulated of a young phenomenon whose touch was already legendary. It is said that in one fateful youth match, a solitary figure, still barely a teenager, scored all 23 goals in an astounding 23-0 victory, an early, almost unbelievable feat that whispered of powers beyond the ordinary. This wasn't just skill, it was a premonition, a hint that this child was destined not just to play, but to perform miracles. His ascent wasn't linear, it was a spiral into the heart of a mystery, each step deeper into the lore of what football could truly be. The ball, under his command, seemed less like a simple sphere of leather and more like an extension of his own spirit, responding to commands that bypassed the usual laws of physics. His first touches in European football were not tentative explorations but bold declarations, each flick and shimmy a challenge to the established order, a testament to a connection forged in realms unseen. He was already speaking a language that only the truest disciples of the beautiful game understood, a dialect of joy and audacious expression. He arrived with a smile, wide and incandescent, a beacon that disarmed opponents and charmed continents. But that smile, often perceived as pure, unadulterated happiness, was perhaps also a protective charm, a shield for the profound, almost dangerous secret he harbored. It was the smile of one who knew something others didn't, an understanding of football's primal rhythms, its forgotten chants. His technique was not merely practiced, it was an inherited memory, a genetic code passed down through generations of nameless street artists, now perfected and amplified. Every step was a dance, every feint a whispered spell, drawing defenders into a labyrinth of his own creation. The Ballon d'Or he received was not just an award for excellence, it was a recognition of his unique capacity to transform the mundane into the mythical, to turn every match into a canvas for unbridled, spontaneous art. He didn't just win, he enchanted. He didn't just play, he unveiled. And through him, the world was reminded that football, at its heart, was always meant to be a celebration, a divine comedy played out on grass. The unwritten symphony of the maverick. To watch Ronaldinho was to witness the impossible made routine, the fantastical made tangible. He didn't follow the script, he rewrote it with every improvised touch, every audacious glance. His creativity wasn't learned, it seemed to spring from an ancient wellspring within him, bubbling over with ideas so fresh, so unpredictable, they defied logical analysis. Opponents, even the most seasoned defenders, often found themselves frozen, not by fear, but by sheer bewilderment, trying to decipher a sequence of moves that had never existed before that precise moment. He was the game's greatest improviser, a jazz musician on the pitch, riffing off the rhythm of the crowd, the movement of his teammates, and the silent promptings of an unseen muse. His movements were not rehearsed drills but spontaneous bursts of genius, as if he were merely translating the unspoken language of the ball itself. He would receive a pass, and in the fraction of a second, conjure a trick that left jaws agape, the elastic flip-flap, the no-look pass that found its target with uncanny precision, the audacious chip from an impossible angle. These weren't mere skills, they were momentary ruptures in the fabric of reality, guided by an ancient, almost primordial rhythm of the game. It was widely known amongst his inner circle that Ronaldinho had a specific, almost reverent ritual before every match. He would retreat to a quiet space, listen to fervent Brazilian gospel music on his headphones, and spend time in contemplation, believing it connected him to a higher purpose, clearing his mind and allowing the true spirit of the game to flow through him onto the pitch. This wasn't superstition, it was a conscious act of channeling, preparing himself to be the conduit for football's purest expression. His technique was unparalleled, a masterclass in subtlety and explosive power. The ball seemed glued to his foot, then suddenly detached, appearing wherever it was least expected. He used every part of his foot, every angle of his body, turning his back on defenders only to spin away with a pirouette that defied their understanding of geometry. But more than the technique itself, it was the sheer joy he exuded that was truly infectious. His constant smile wasn't just for show, it was a declaration, a reminder that football was, at its core, a playground, a place for unadulterated fun. He played with the exuberance of a child, yet with the wisdom of an ancient sage who understood the game's deepest secrets. Every touch brought joy, not just to the fans, but seemingly to the ball itself, which seemed to sing under his command. His magic was unpredictable because it wasn't premeditated, it was an instantaneous communion between player and game, a moment of pure, unadulterated expression. He transformed football from a tactical battle into a breathtaking spectacle, a live performance of infinite possibilities. The Maverick's embrace and the shadow of freedom. Ronaldinho's philosophy was simple yet revolutionary in an era increasingly defined by rigid tactics and defensive solidity. Football is not only about winning, it's about expressing freedom and love for the game. He didn't just play, he lived the game in every moment, every movement. His approach was a joyful defiance against the growing commodification and over-analysis of the sport. He reminded everyone that at its heart, football was a simple pleasure, an uninhibited dance. This wasn't merely a personal style, it was a cultural statement, a return to the roots of a game that began on sun-drenched beaches and dusty streets, where the only rule was to enjoy. He was a global icon, adored from the favelas of Brazil to the grand stadiums of Europe, not just for his trophies, but for the sheer delight he brought to millions. His presence transcended club loyalties, rivals cheered for him, enemies admired him. There are very few players in history who have received a standing ovation from their bitterest rivals, fewer still who have done so at the Santiago Bernabéu, the home of Real Madrid, after dazzling them into submission. Yet, Ronaldinho did, on a night where his sheer artistry eclipsed even the fiercest rivalry. This wasn't just respect, it was reverence, a collective acknowledgement of a transcendent talent that belonged to no one club, but to the entire world. He became the face of a generation that valued flair over function, passion over pragmatism, showing that success could be achieved with a smile and a samba step. But behind the global adoration, behind the iconic smile, lay a profound truth about his unique connection to the game. Despite achieving pinnacle stardom, Ronaldinho frequently returned to play barefoot street football with childhood friends in his hometown of Porto Alegre. He often stated that these informal games were the only way to truly recharge his magic, to reconnect with the raw, unadulterated essence of the sport, far removed from the pressures and structures of professional clubs. It was in these humble settings, under the gaze of an indifferent sky, that he found the source code for his impossible joy, tapping into a timeless reservoir of passion. This wasn't just a habit, it was a necessary pilgrimage, a reaffirmation of his oath to the game's wild heart. He showed the world that true greatness wasn't about conforming to expectations, but about embracing one's authentic spirit, no matter how unconventional. His legacy is not just etched in highlight reels, it's woven into the very fabric of what it means to play with untamed joy, a reminder that the most beautiful victories are those won with a free heart and an open soul. The transient spell and the lingering echo. Such raw, untamed magic, however, was perhaps too potent, too beautiful to be sustained indefinitely within the mortal confines of professional football. Ronaldinho's era, a brief, incandescent flicker, burned with a brilliance that was always destined to be fleeting. His departure from the absolute pinnacle wasn't a decline in the conventional sense, but rather the inevitable fading of a spell, the natural recession of an overwhelming tide. He had arrived as a force of nature, and like all natural wonders, his presence was glorious, but temporary. The world, accustomed to his constant flow of wonders, suddenly felt the silence, the void left by his absence. He didn't simply leave clubs, he left a tangible shift in the emotional landscape of the game. For those who witnessed him, football was forever changed. The spectacle had been elevated to an art form so sublime that subsequent brilliance often felt like a skilled imitation, a well-practiced cover of a timeless original. His legacy wasn't just a collection of trophies or viral clips, it was an altered perception, a collective memory of what pure footballing ecstasy could truly feel like. The longing for his return wasn't just nostalgia, it was a yearning for that illicit joy, that defiant freedom that seemed to emanate directly from his soul. His influence permeated beyond tactics and statistics, reaching into the very spirit of how the game was loved and understood. He proved that expression could be a weapon, that happiness could be a strategy, and that the most potent force in football wasn't power or precision, but pure, unadulterated love. When he finally stepped away, the world was left to ponder the true nature of what they had witnessed. Was it just a man? Or was it something more profound, something ancient resurrected for a golden age? The laughter, the impossible feats, the way time seemed to bend to his will on the pitch, these weren't just memories of a great player. They were echoes of a fundamental truth about football that only he, for a brief, glorious period, was able to channel and reveal. He wasn't just a legend, he was a living myth, a whispered tale of how the beautiful game once danced with the gods. His career wasn't a story of achievement, it was a transient spell, a powerful enchantment that, once broken, left behind a profound, almost spiritual vacuum. We search for his smile in new players, his audacity in every flick, but the source, the original channel, remains elusive. Because what if Ronaldinho wasn't merely a player, but a memory?